Hello, this is From Day One, and welcome to our webinar, in which we'll be exploring a pressing topic. This is called Talent Outlook for 2020, Defining the New Contours of the Labor Market. It goes without saying that quite a bit has changed this year. Our labor market may actually look unrecognizable even when compared to the very recent past. New jobs are coming online. We must adjust our practices to meet the current talent pools of remote workers. For recruiters, aligning best techniques from algorithmic targeting to compelling job titles will be essential in increasing the volume of quality candidates. Before we dive into this topic, we'd like to thank our partners, Appcast, Eightfold, and Monster. I'll tell you a little bit about each one. Appcast is the leading developer of programmatic job advertising technology, powering a revolution across the global recruitment industry. From its pay-per-applicant job ad exchange, Accelerate, to its innovative recruitment advertising optimization platform, Appcast is changing how employers, recruitment and staffing firms, ad agencies, and job sites attract high-quality job seekers. Eightfold delivers the talent intelligence platform, the most effective way for companies to identify promising candidates, reach diversity hiring goals, retain top performers, and engage talent. Eightfold's patented artificial intelligence-based platform empowers enterprises to turn talent management into a competitive advantage. And lastly, Monster. Monster is a global leader in connecting people and jobs, transforming the recruiting industry and the way employers and candidates find the right fit. Monster is thrilled to partner with the From Day One community to help recruiters be more innovative in finding quality talent in today's labor market. Now, a few logistical items. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand within 24 hours after the event. Look out for an email in about 24 hours with the link. That email will also have info on SHRM or SHRM credit for this session. And look out for a written account of the conversation next week on our website, fromday1.co. That's FROMDAYONE.co. Around 1 hour from now, that's 3 p.m. on the East Coast, we will have a Q&A session. You can submit your questions anytime, including now, using the Q&A button that's at the bottom of your screen. Now, I'd like to introduce our moderator, business journalist Lydia Dishman. She reports and edits for Fast Company on tech and leadership. She's written for CBS Money Watch, Fortune, the New York Times, among many, many others. Lydia, thanks so much, and over to you.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you all for being here today. I can't see, but I know the audience is there, and I can assure you that we have a very timely and lively discussion planned for you today. I did want to just start by saying that although the unemployment numbers are high, there have been some statistics that have come across in the course of my reporting that indicate that companies are beginning to hire again, and not just with essential workers, but expanding their organizations. So any little bit of bright spot is encouraging as we move through this unprecedented time. So without further ado, I'd like to have my stellar set of panelists introduce themselves. Heidi, why don't you get us started? Tell us a little bit about how many people are in your organization and how it's handled hiring since the pandemic started.
Sure, thank you, Lydia. My name is Heidi Myers, and I oversee our global talent acquisition function at Ball Corporation. Ball Corporation has approximately 18,000 employees worldwide. We are the largest global can manufacturer in the world, and we have a very prominent presence in the aerospace and defense industry as well. And during this pandemic, we thankfully have been very fortunate, and we have been full speed ahead with hiring. We didn't pause a minute. We are in growth mode, and we are expanding, and we are our whole recruiting team is just busting at the seams with positions right now. So we've been really fortunate to have been able to, really come out of this on top and really be successful. And we haven't had any impacts from it, and that's been fantastic for us.
That's certainly good news, the bright spots that we're looking for. Dharmendra, why don't you go next?
Yeah, hi, this is Dharmendra Sethi. I am Global Head for Talent Acquisition and Talent Management at a company called GlobalLogic. So we are primarily a product engineering services company. Basically, what we do is we help our clients become software companies. What it means is basically connect the dots for them to be able to go to the market with their product or part of their product. And since we have done this for multiple vertical industries, we have the understanding of how to go to the market fast. So I have what 18,000 employees globally, touching about again 18,000. I have a team of over 200 people who are in my team. It's in T80 across the globe. We have presence in Asia Pacific, in India, in Central Eastern Europe, in Poland, in Ukraine, in Germany, in Croatia. And then we have presence in South America, in Chile and Argentina, and then a strong presence in North America. So just to give you a perspective, while again we also got impacted by a pandemic. Here we had some customers in the retail space and some in industries where again media where we got affected. So we had some ramp downs, some end of projects, but we were able to quickly jump back. Again, I can't give you the exact numbers, but we have a maybe a small single-digit dip in our revenue quarter on quarter, and we are already forecasting a positive quarter that is starting July of this year. And also, what changed big time was how we go about hiring. In the sense, basically, we had to go virtual quickly. Being the software industry, it was easier for us. Almost within a week, we had about 98% people working from home, because obviously we are able to do that quickly. What changed for my function primarily, which I just want to share with the audience here, is that hiring remote was not a problem. We were always doing it because we had to engage people across different locations, and sometimes obviously most of the time we would bring them into our office in other locations. But what changed was to be able to quickly onboard them from need of software, hardware, and knowledge transfer, adaptation. That was the piece where we had to adapt quickly, because we were doing that in person most of the times and we had to do it online. But then the part where we got challenged, I have to be very truthful here, the existing engagement that we were working on were able to smoothly go home and be able to perform. But the new engagements we were starting, getting people to onboard and work with our DNA was a challenge. We had to look at the productivity issues, which we are trying to still work on in some terms of building a dashboard and and seeing before and after situation. But what on the positive side changed? The restrictions of a zip code or an area code or a country code changed. Now I have access to larger workforce, and there's adaptation at the hiring manager side, but we have people who were not able to give contiguous work time are able to do that, and I'm able to engage with a much larger workforce. So I think there's a lot of silver lining, and as far as the industry goes, we are in an industry which is going to help do the digital transformation, which is the ask of the day. We are looking at pretty positive next quarters and beyond that. So we are looking at a decently good growth here this year.
Thank you. That's really good context. And actually, I do want to come back to some of the things that you said a little bit later on in the discussion, because we are going to be talking about best practices. So Leah, why don't you take it next?
Thanks, Lydia. Good afternoon to everybody. My name is Leah Daniels, and I run strategy for Appcast. Appcast is an organization that has this unique position in the market where we work with just over 1,000 medium and large businesses who are doing various types of hiring. And so through this pandemic, we've gotten to work with companies who were obviously rolling down their hiring, but quite a few who were on the essential employees in the medical space or essential in retail and grocery and the supply chains. And so hopefully we can talk a bit about some of the data and what the market is telling us in terms of what candidates are doing, companies are doing, how those two are sort of interacting in unexpected ways, and how this particular set of circumstances with COVID and the recession and even the protests have now impacted how hiring is changing and evolving at a rate faster, I think, than any of us have ever seen before. So Appcast has tons of data, which is very exciting for me. As a business, we did not slow down 1 second. We have continued to hire. We are much smaller than some of these other organizations at 140 employees. But again, like Dharmendra, we are a software company, so we were able to shift from office to remote over a weekend, and adapt very quickly, and employees have continued to push forward and really be productive and great through this process.
Well, I'm a total data wonk, so I will be coming back to you for stats a little bit later on.
I love it. Yes.
Larry, why don't you go next?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Larry McAlister. I'm the global head of talent acquisition and talent enablement for NetApp, which is a data cloud company, which I think everybody is nowadays. And we do have reduced hiring. We were going to have reduced hiring anyway, and then with the pandemic, it went down. So we're less than half of Rex year over year right now. But the positive side is we are taking the energy of the TA team and my talent enablement team to invest in 4 technologies that we're implementing at the same time this year. So it's, we're calling it the year of technology execution. I believe that we are finally in the golden age of HR technology. And that's what we're going to really be focused on now. And to make it even better, the silver lining of the pandemic is people are hungry now for this. They'll go more quickly to adopting these new technologies. So there's some benefit there. So I'm looking forward to getting to the conversation.
And last but not least, Hilary, why don't you introduce yourself and briefly tell us how many people are in your organization and how you've handled hiring since the pandemic?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. So my name is Hilary. I work for Comcast. We have roughly 190,000 employees. Most recently with the merger with Sky out of Europe. So very exciting for us. And including NBC Universal, and then of course the cable side. So I specifically work for the cable side. And so, but obviously we had a pause in hiring in March, like most people did. And so, but we have started to pick back up. We're not back in full swing 100%, but we have started to pick back up. So for example, some of our customer facing roles, we're kind of in full swing there. So we call them centers of excellence, but for just their call centers. But anyways, we are definitely back in full swing, and we have completely shifted how we look at talent and how we're doing everything. So from everything is virtual. So we are interviewing virtually. We are onboarding virtually. Everybody is still, I shouldn't say everybody, we have most of our workforce still at home. And then we're actually now starting to reopen our retail stores. Our technicians have been rock stars, and they have been working through this entire pandemic, of course, with the sole focus on their safety and our customer safety. But as we know, with folks that are homeschooling and doing all of, if you have internet is one of the most crucial amenities that we can have right now. So they have just been wonderful in supporting us through this entire thing and still out there supporting our customers. So I guess to summarize, I would say we're not back 100%. We're kind of back 50% in our hiring processes right now. And again, looking at things completely differently. And I am based in Denver, so represent our West Division, can certainly speak to other aspects of the company, but everything from the Twin Cities in Minnesota west over to California.
Thank you. You actually provided a very good segue into my first question, which I'd like all of you to answer. Whatever stage you're at with hiring, what are you seeing as the roles that are considered most essential to fill right now? Because, for a while it was just basically, shift workers in healthcare and grocery that were, really the jobs that were happening. So I just want to know from you all, what are the most essential roles? And do you think that's going to change much over the next 6 months? Heidi, let's put that back to you first.
Sure. If any of my coworkers are listening to this, they're probably not going to want to hear me prioritize what I think are the most essential, because everything's essential, right? But I would say for us, we are in the midst of building brand new manufacturing plants in the US, and staffing those plants has been absolutely crucial and the most essential thing for us for meeting our growth objectives. So we are putting the final touches on an aluminum cup plant that is based out of Rome, Georgia. And that plant is going to be opening here shortly. So we will start producing aluminum cups, which we are you're hopefully going to start seeing them in retail establishments when we do get back to more of a normal world where there's outings and large sporting events and stadium events, those should be the cups that you're going to be drinking your beverages and your beer out of as well. And then we are also building a plant right outside of Phoenix, Arizona, in a town called Glendale, Arizona, and that's going to be one of our can manufacturing plants. So for us to sustain and to continue to grow on the trajectory that we're growing on, those roles and those plants have been absolutely crucial for us, and we are just all hands on deck, making sure those plants open in the time frames that we have set out for them.
Thank you. Larry, essential work, and is that, you know, also talk about levels a little bit too, because I think it's important to know if these are roles that are individual contributors or more, you know, executive management.
Right. Okay. So in typical Silicon Valley fashion, the essential roles are go-to-market and engineering. Everyone else is on hold. So I think, you know, we are one of the companies that are saying, is our go-to-market strategy the same now? Is it more virtual selling? Is it more younger people? Because the face of the customer is a different face. So some of that is what we're looking at. So we are doing all levels, but it's more what type of jobs are going to be different now as we move forward.
Leah?
So from the data, which is a sort of different way to look at this, yes, I need like that. It's interesting, the hardest to fill role pre-COVID would have been truck drivers. I don't know if you guys all know this, long haul truck drivers are nearly impossible to find. And drivers in general are very challenging. But shifting, we have seen a dramatic change where the hourly workforce is the most in demand and also the most uninterested in taking jobs, right? And that's a lot to do with the CARES Act and the stipend, the federal stipend that may run out on July 31st if that's not renewed. So one of the big challenges in hiring across most organizations today that are trying to find people are the hourly workers who are making 2 to 3 times on unemployment than they would be making actually going to work. Nurses remain challenging as they were before, but particularly in the critical care and ICU space, the number of nurses that have been furloughed or laid off out of hospitals is actually very high. For non-essential surgeries, and supporting the non-essential surgeries, doctors' offices, and school nurses. We're starting to see folks in schools being laid off now. So we are seeing a shift in the dynamic of who is critical for hiring as on a broad basis. Obviously, for each and every company, you've got your own sort of set of priorities. You know, for my company personally, we need more and more people for customer success and customer service because our customers are continuing to demand more as they are, most of them essential organizations. And so their demands are very high and we are trying to support them. But across the market, it's warehouse workers, it's store workers, it's delivery drivers doing shopping, delivery shoppers and delivery drivers. Those are the hardest to fill positions in the US market today.
Will be interesting to see how that changes over the next 6 months.
It's going to change on August 1st, I think.
Yeah,
right. I think we're going to see 20 million
yeah.
people try to get a job on August 1st who are not currently looking. And you see that in the data where these folks are not searching for jobs. They're not clicking on jobs. They're not applying for jobs. So we're going to see an influx of candidates, I think, in the late summer.
Dharmendra, essential roles for you.
So again, as Larry mentioned, right, we also are in the space of being in Silicon Valley and being very focused on, you know, product engineering. So our two main things are to look at our go-to-market strategy in terms of what will not come back, as we're talking about, because we were in the space of retail, some part of sports, some other industries which may take some time to come back. But then there are some industries which are going very fast, and again, where we are trying to help, you know, do this digital transformation. Though we are always very focused on doing engagements on digital and product engineering services. What is going to change here, Lydia, is that we are going to be, and we are already doing that. You know, we are We are hiring people for setting up advisories. So we are hiring people at the top end in terms of subject matter experts on both vertical, that is domain and technology, whether it's cloud, whether it is other some platform engineering. So we are hiring architects, we are hiring subject matter experts, and we are also hiring people in the space of again, this is going to become very important for a lot of organization, is the security part of it, the cyber security, ID security. That is also a very large focus. And one biggest part, which again, we also have a design studio. Basically, we call ourselves as a design-led engineering company. What that means is that we have a studio which basically has very strong focus on the UX, CX part of it, the customer experience, user experience, and that's how we will define the journey of our customer and their customers. So that is very important piece. So some bit of work, I wouldn't say too much, but in virtual reality and augmented reality as well, but that will probably come. And when you say what will happen after this, because right now we are trying to just show the way how complex projects or programs can be created and run. So we are looking at that expertise. Behind this, once we get over this, maybe in the next quarter or so, then we are going to start building their R&D labs. We call it R&D lab. We do it some on-site here in the United States, some we do in other part of the world, where we will build and do that re-engineering or the transformation part of work for them. So this is our focus for now and probably in the future. And again, just to not forget, which is very important part, which I think maybe Leah mentioned as well, very strong focus on data analysis, data engineering, because that is going to become very key for how all companies are going to focus and do their strategy moving forward. So that is also a very key focus where we are hiring, but at this time, only at the higher end, at the SME level, and maybe just one level below that.
Thank you. You all are doing a lot of the heavy lifting for me, because that was a nice segue to my next question, which I'm going to take over to Hilary, since you've sort of already answered this one. Let's talk about how recruitment is changing and what tools or strategies you're using that you've added into the process or perhaps are still using.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot has changed, obviously. We are seeing more folks that are interested in those work from home roles, right? So we are offering both. So we do still have, like I said, folks out in the field, but there is, last time I checked, 180% increase in folks that are searching, candidates are searching for jobs that work remote and or at home. So that is the desire right now. So we're trying to meet folks where they are with obviously understanding the limitations, and people, we still need the jobs to be sometimes in the field, like I said. However, so what we're doing right now is utilizing all virtual interviews. We are utilizing a company called Modern Hire for our virtual interviews. They are formerly known as Montage, if anybody was familiar with that company. So everything is virtual. We are interviewing on Modern Hire platform. We are able to then, for folks that are going to be remote and virtual, we're actually shipping them all of their equipment that they need to their home prior to their first day. And then obviously on their first day, everything is virtual. So Modern Hire has been a great resource for us. But as we use Teams as an organization. We basically live, eat, breathe everything on Teams right now. And so the video, I think most of our employees, I know we've sent out kind of the engagement surveys to say that they feel just as connected to us even in a virtual environment. So the customer facing jobs are still the most crucial in our world. Like I said, there are people that are working from home. You have students, maybe some of them are off for the summer now, but we need to make sure that our customers are taken care of first and foremost. So that is the most important thing right now, to make sure that we can set them up for success. So that answer your question?
Well, I'm curious about, you mentioned Teams and you mentioned Modern Hire. Specific to the recruitment process, is there some sort of referral system that you have in Teams, or are you using other tools to recruit?
Our ATS is SuccessFactors. We are moving to Workday next year. It was supposed to be on June 1st. It got pushed back for obvious reasons. So we are moving to Workday. So that's that is our ATS for all of the all of our recruitment processes, taking folks through the system. I did want to make one quick comment because Leah, I think you mentioned it is hard to get people interested in these hourly roles while the unemployment benefits are still happening, at least until the end of July. So we had to have some tough conversations in March with the hourly candidates that were offered. And it was those are tough conversations to say, for the safety of everybody, including you, we need to pause and make sure that we bring you on board at a time that we feel like everybody is going to be safe, including trainers, you, et cetera. And we were really worried about what would happen to those candidates. Are they going to wait around? Are they going to find other employment? And then also we started hiring some of these folks in June. Will they not want to come back until August because these unemployment benefits are so great? We've seen 95% of them coming back, which is, it's amazing. And I think, that gives me hope that I think that people are still really interested in finding work. The unemployment benefits are great, but they're not forever. And so it's just so exciting to see that people are still really interested in finding a job, having really good benefits, and the security of a job that will last beyond the unemployment benefits. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
I think that's a great point because I think a lot of the folks are looking at some of the hourly positions that are open right now as temporary, and that's part of it. I also have to wonder, did you guys do an excellent job at just nurturing them over the last, 3 months, and so that you were still top of mind and they felt the love? Because I do think that has an opportunity to have an impact as well, which is great, right?
We definitely
that's a tool, right? Too, isn't it? The whole sort of relationship building is, we don't think of it as in terms of a tool, but that's definitely what it is.
Well, look, I like to jump in on the technology question. I know you asked it, and I see in the Q&A about technology. So we did what we call a tech parade at the beginning before the pandemic. And I'm telling everyone on this call, if you don't think you're a technologist, you are behind the curve. Technologies has advanced so much in just 2 years since I last looked that it was mind-blowing. And we cut tens of millions of dollars out of the business, but I got investment from the CEO staff to invest in technology this year. And 2, I'll talk about, because 2 are on hiring, 2 are on other things. But 1 is your sponsor, Eightfold. Eightfold uses AI technology not only to match candidates that are 100%, but can predict this person can go into the role in a year if you just develop them, because we've looked at everyone's backgrounds. They can infer diversity. We think this person may be African-American because they are in these clubs or in these schools. It's sped up, and it tells you, we think this person has a higher % chance of responding to your email based on their history. So it's a mind-blowing, amazing technology. The other one is HireView, which is digital interviewing. So, there's Zoom, which is fine, but this is a technology where you can do whiteboarding, you can do coding tests live. You can also do on demand, where you send out a link, they answer the questions and come back to you. So no more manager phone screens. I always think of a manager phone screen as the manager on their email, and a candidate hiding in their car because they don't want to caught from their job that they're interviewing for new candidates. So those 2 are picking up the speed, the efficiency, and the amount of lift it takes hiring managers and recruiters to work. So I would just say, I encourage everyone to go have your own little tech parade and find out what's going on out there, because it's mind-blowing, and it's a brand new way that HR should look at technology.
I can add to the process if you,
I just want to pause a moment because we need to do our station identification, and then we can come back to this because obviously everybody has a lot of ideas, and I think this is great. Nick?
Hello. Hi, everyone. Just wanted to remind anyone that's joining in midstream or missed the intro that we are from day one, and we are exploring talent outlook for 2020. Our sponsors are Appcast, Eightfold, and Monster. And as a reminder, you can submit your questions at any time. Looks like we've got a few coming in already. We will answer as many of those as we can during the Q&A session that starts in 31 minutes or at the top of the hour. Back to you, Lydia, and thanks.
Thank you. Dharmendra, sorry, we
no,
needed
it's
to do
important.
that, so go ahead.
That is important. So I just want to add to what Larry mentioned, right? So obviously, and there are some questions, I didn't read all of them, but in the Q&A questions there. So how are we doing this transformation, right? Obviously, being a technology company like Larry, we also use technology to do this transformation. What it means is, like, somebody's asking, how do you do this remote onboarding, right? So what we have done, I'll give you an example. While we hired about 5,000 plus people last year, given we grew about 25% year on year, being on the size. This year maybe it'll be less, maybe 4,000. I hope it's in the range. We'll see how it opens up. But what we have done is we have broken down the process. Again, when we say, and who are the actors in a hiring process, right? There is a recruiter, there is an interviewer, there is a coordinator scheduler, there is an SME, and then there is an HR in that. So we have just defined the process and we have broken it down, because if I have to hire, say, typically sometime, in different part of the world, I would do a hiring drive where I would hire maybe 50, 70 people on a single day or a weekend, right? Things like that. So I have done that. How can I use, say, Zoom to be able to park people into a separate room, while they're doing a coordinated test? As Larry mentioned, I can give them a coordinated test. They're doing their coding work. I can do the other part of the interview. I can bring in an SME for that one part of the questionnaire when I'm trying to fit a role. So this is one part of the process of interview, onboarding and all that. Then also the biggest part, which is going to be a challenge for all of us, I guess, is that I think we use different mechanisms to be able to see how these people will culturally fit, right? And that is not so easy sometimes when you don't meet with them, and we are so used to meeting people when we hire. So we have taken help of some psychometric testing, right? Again, how is the role fitment happening for this particular role? Is it a leadership role? Is it again, hands-on role? So we are doing that part as well. And I do understand a lot about this AI technology as well. And there are such fantastic tools available there where you can anonymize who are the applicants, so you can improve and increase your diversity hiring. You can have some very focused way of, like, again, I'll give you example, just maybe a quick example. Like if you want to present, a small company tries to hire and it takes too much time going through 10, 15, 20 candidates to be able to pinpoint those 4 candidates. Here you can send a profile to people who are interested. They like your profile. If they're interested, they respond. So you suddenly kind of made the pyramid from 50 to maybe 10 people. So it's more better use of your time. And also you're using tools to be able to send a message again, and again, and also highlight somewhere, again, in terms of, suppose I'm trying to focus on diversity hiring, I can send that message in my this thing, and then also use chat box to answer basic questions rather than put too much time by recruitment. And then the recruitment totally becomes more of a sales job, a relationship management job, rather than trying to do sourcing and all those things. This is all getting automated, and matching is getting automated. The gap between the candidate who's applied to what you need is very visible. Is it 2 weeks or is it 6 months? If it is 2-3 weeks, I will hire and train. And that is one thing. And the other side, again, since we are in a company where we have this engagement which run from 6 months to 18, 24 months, we also make sure if we have visibility of people finishing an engagement from 4 to 6 weeks from now, we start the training program. We'll bridge that gap between what my forecasted demand is and how I'm going to be able to use my internal folks. So all these things are helping a lot in terms of forecasting, predictive hiring, and training, and getting onto engagement. So it is actually, again, I know while we all want to keep the human touch on, but technology is coming and helping us being more efficient and actually more productive, because there's no concept of I'm stuck in the traffic and I can't find your address. You obviously will find it because link is right there in your email.
Thank you. Heidi, do you want to talk about recruiting tools? We can talk a little bit more about the interviewing process as well, but I'm first curious about recruiting.
Yeah, so we actually just went live globally with SuccessFactors, so SAP SuccessFactors, on the 10th of this month. So we had an excellent transition, and we are live with our recruiting tool. And it's been really, really promising for us. Obviously, going over for that large of a company and that big of a cutover was quite daunting, but we have the entire talent package with SuccessFactors. So we're using that as our applicant tracking system. And then it's been interesting hearing just some of the things on the call that I think Hilary mentioned, Modern Hire. So we are actually looking at Modern Hire and Brazen for some of our very large virtual hiring events. You know, something that we continue to talk about is we're staffing these plants, we're growing, we're hiring hundreds of people at a time, and we've always done very large in-person hiring events, and that's just been flipped upside down, right? So now we're doing it in the middle of a pandemic with a population that isn't necessarily used to doing any type of virtual hiring events. And we're figuring out, we're learning a lot as we go. So we're learning that there's quite a few tools out there that we need to get on the forefront of and get in place for us for, like for instance, when you're doing a very large interview event and you have somebody who doesn't show up to their interview time slot, you have somebody as a backup ready to go in there. So there's no disruption in the process. So it's all very new to us, and it's all, quite frankly, all very new to the candidate pool that we would typically target. So we are doing everything we can to use technology in our favor in that sense, but we're super excited about our new system we have in place, and now it's a time of how do we start to add on these different things. So as some of the members on the call have been mentioning different software tools, I'm taking notes over here as well because this has become applicable to us and we're right at the forefront of it. So perfect timing. I'm learning as well as I'm on here.
And Heidi, one quick thing on Modern Hire, you guys are probably using this when there is a concierge that is available for every single interview that you have. I mean, if you had interviews all day long, any point in time, if you're having technology issues, you have a question, you're having trouble, there's a live concierge that's available that is included with Modern Hire. So wonderful platform.
Good, thank you.
Leah, you wanted to jump in on this one?
So I should tell you guys a little background. My previous life, I looked at tools and technology for a ATS called Bullhorn, which supports the staffing in the high volume staffing space. And so I actually remember the early interview platforms and the fact that no company would adopt them despite like very good marketing and messaging. And it's sort of funny how we went from like all lukewarm about these video interviewing platforms and it sort of shot up, and now everybody's really engaged and interested. And I think we're going to see those platforms evolve very rapidly over the next 6 to 12 months. But I'd be remiss also not to talk about one of the things that we're seeing, which is this need for flexibility because of the uncertainty over the next 6, 12, 18 months. We're increasingly hearing companies say that they are really uncomfortable with the contracts they're locked into, the commitments that they made based on their projections from last, Q4, if you're on a calendar. And so a lot of the companies that we talk to are talking about their hiring plans are anything but set in stone. They're fluid at best. And we've been working with a lot of organizations around how do you be agile in your recruiting process? How do you have technology that supports that, and how do you have technology that supports your actual human capital needs? So not just the interviewing process, but even just technology that's more flexible in getting candidates, and so that you're not committing yourself in a position where you've put all of your eggs in a basket that is not working for you right now, but did work very well last year. The other piece that we're seeing on the other half of it is as August 1st, which I feel like I'm making it sound like a looming date, and probably because I have anxiety about it. But do we all go from this environment where we couldn't get candidates, and even through this period right now, we either weren't interested or really couldn't get them, to being overwhelmed with candidates? And we reintroduced this crazy idea of the black hole, right? Where now we have brand reputation on the line as candidates are coming back into the market and they're applying for your jobs and they're frustrated with the failures to respond. And how do you get technology that doesn't just make your apply process longer and harder and more difficult, but rather does a better job of getting jobs out of circulation and getting candidates only where you need them? And how do you sort of rebalance your own business? And that's a lot of what we do with companies, is to help them rebalance that there's needs to make sure they're agile as they go forward in the next 18 months.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about this as an opportunity to diversify the talent pipeline, because I think, especially here in the US, we have reached an inflection point with the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And I think that those ripple effects are being felt globally because there have been protests all over the world. So I think that people are holding companies' feet to the fire and saying, what are you doing in terms of diversity, inclusion, and equity? So can we talk a little bit about how the processes have changed, if they have, and if there is some measure of automation or artificial intelligence that can take the bias out of the human equation, or what are you seeing in terms of trends? Larry, why don't you start with that?
Okay, great. So there's two-pronged answer, well, three maybe. One is these tools do help you identify minority candidates much more easily than you normally would using the AI technology. So you can build a slate. You can just press a button and say, I only want female candidates for this job. So that the technology's there. The bigger lift is getting managers to hire the candidates. People are much more interested in hiring someone who looks like them. Less risk. I don't want to make a mistake and say something bad. So that education and change management, I've been here a year and a half. I've increased both years, Black pipeline, it's increased both years, but the hiring has not. So that I think is the kernel of change that has to happen. And that's a systematic wide change. And then the third thing is we have listening sessions with parts of our CEO staff and Black employees this week, and it was sobering. It was sobering how we've just failed. We can do so much better, I think. And what you hear a lot is, I'm the only one. So I'm the only one in my group. I'm the only one in my department. I'm the only one in all of engineering. And so the double pressure to perform and also bust stereotypes is immense. And how do we make sure that we are supporting the groups? Getting men is one, but driving change and promotion, it's got to be such a much more heavy focus than we've done in the past. So yay, technology. Another one we're bringing in is called Fuel 50, which is the first time in my history that you can actually see real jobs to build your career path, actual jobs inside the company. So you put in your desires and your skills, and the technology matches you up to jobs. So we're hoping that if we build that to be much more unbiased and use that as the tool to find out, okay, these are the African Americans who say they want jobs. How do we match them to those jobs? Like, we now know. So that's super exciting as well at the end of the year.
Larry, have you guys done anything to change your interview teams as part of what you're doing? Because one of the things the data shows us is that if your interview team is, and no offense to anyone on the call here, a slate of white men,
totally, you
are more likely to choose a white man. But if you even happen to choose a non-white man, they are more likely to say no to you.
You're so
right. So are you guys adjusting the interview teams as
part
of your process?
The hard part with adjusting, so there's two ways to do it. The hard part of adjusting it is, I don't have enough minority people to put on interview teams, right? It'd be like they'd be interviewing all day long. But we are going to figure out a way that, could there be, I know what Google does where they just have interview teams, period. It's not always the hiring manager. But we are going to find ways to make sure that it's not all white men for sure. We started with just at least having one female on the interview slate, but that's all sort of in process. And I'd love to hear, data that you have or ways that you have seen it. I'll take that advice for sure.
The data says you need 30% of non-white male voices in order to make a change or to be heard. So I appreciate and applaud the one woman, but you probably want to move that number up.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard that exact stat. You need to have at least 30% in order to make sustainable change.
Yeah, and given that the U.S. population is 51% female, at least keep that number in mind too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm also thinking about in order to make systemic change, you really have to start with the very first thing that your company puts out there, which is the job description itself. And there are AI tools like Textio, for example.
Textio is great.
Yeah. So can anyone else talk about either AI or what you're doing to change at that level?
So yeah, I'll just again share again. Obviously, I have to admit that it's a long way to go. We are doing our bit, but not far enough. I would have to admit that. So what basically, at least apart from what Larry mentioned, absolutely the tools are there. We should be using them. But then the question about how do you create that panel? So we have done a few things. Like we have this trusted interviewers. It's not a hiring manager, but a trusted interviewer where we can manage, train them how to interview, what to do, and get a better result. But what we feel at GlobalLogic, what we are trying to do differently, or at least trying to do, is that if we hire in the senior management, right? Again, if we get that diversity into senior management, that starts changing. Because as I said, you end up hiring people like yourself, right? So if I'm going to have top of the organization of whatever, it's a sales, or it is finance, or it is something else, then that will change. So while we are, again, as I mentioned, we are a global company on front of diversity in the name of ethnicity, or again, that is good. Gender, we are doing fairly fine, but I think we can do better. But yeah, in terms of again, are we hiring enough Black people? No. And again, that is where we're trying to make some changes and bring in that thought process by hiring the top people at that level, and then trying to maybe make this thing. And just to answer your question, while the tools are there, we consciously took, again, obviously influenced by what is happening in the industry or in the market. We consciously took this decision that we are going to change the way we will write our job description. So your question is valid. We are not doing enough, but it is on our roadmap to start doing that almost from tomorrow if we can fix it.
Heidi, you want to take that one next?
Yeah. So, I'm really proud. I'm really proud of Ball and all that we do around diversity and inclusion. And we've been at the forefront of this for many years now. And I think the one thing that we can all confidently say is we're not doing enough. We need to do more, and we need to do better. And all of the recent events is just really, it's given us, for better or for worse, just a magnifying glass on what we're doing around this and figuring out how we're going to do this better. And it's not, it's not benchmarking. It's not looking at other external companies. We need to be innovative, and we need to think outside of the box, and we need to be bold and challenge and disruptive, and really just make a stance and put our foot down around this. We have all the tools in place, right? Like, we have the software in place to look at the job descriptions, to take out the biases, to make sure we're attracting a gender neutral candidate pipeline. We conduct unconscious bias interview training for our entire organization, not just our hiring managers. We have unconscious bias training. We have so many internal resource groups that are different affinity groups to help with the inclusivity piece. We've folded it into our leadership DNA. We've taken just so many parts of our organization and have interwoven inclusivity and diversity into it. And at the end of the day, it's still not enough. We still, we hear the stories of folks being promoted over other folks, or people getting a job when they felt like somebody else should have got the job. We try to have the diversity on the interview teams as well. And we can put diversity on the interview teams, but then somebody comes into the department and the department's not a diverse department. So it's like you need to make sure you're advertising it correctly, right? So we recently launched a global employee value proposition, and it's been quite a journey with an external partner, and really being able to talk about our brand and what it's like to work at Ball, and really sharing that message outward. And as we did that, one of the pillars of our employee value proposition is belong. Because that's what all of our employees say. They just feel such a sense of belonging as they work at Ball, and as they start their careers at Ball and continue their careers at Ball. And it's like, how do we get that out there? How do we, white men just shouldn't belong there. It needs to be everybody that belongs there. It needs to be gender and race and ethnicity. And at the end of the day, we can put all the tools in place, and we can continue to do this. And by gosh, we're going to do it, and we're going to invest, and we're going to, put our heads down and come up with more plans around it. But we need to do better. We just always need to do better. And I think that's something that we all can agree on. No matter what fancy tools and everything that are out there, there's systemic racism that is taking place, and it's another pandemic, right? We're not just facing COVID, we're facing this as well, and we need to do better around it.
I just want to say something to that point again, Lydia. So while, we talked about a lot of technology, about AI, but I tell you very frankly, there is a lot of, again, Eightfold is a good company, and I'm very sure all people are trying to do their best to keep this thing right. But if the people who are developing all these things behind, right, again, they're also white male and they have their own bias that gets into AI as well. So we have to be very careful. We just don't want to believe everything AI tells us, because we can get those biases into AI as well. So again, typically you try to search a CEO, you will get a male kind of picture. So that is something which we need to be very conscious. So it's ultimately going to be behavioral, which has to change before we can just go and start depending on technology. This is why again, I champion them being a company which is very focused on technology, but we should be very careful about over dependence on AI stuff.
Well, it's as with any artificial intelligence, it's only as good as the data sets that you put into it. And so if those data sets are biased in some way, which may not be evident to the creators at the time, then the results will also be biased. So you're just stamping out a lot of cookies from the same cutter. And so the ones who are in charge of creating those systems and algorithms really need to be very mindful of biases. Hilary, I didn't want to leave you out of this. So, so do you want to weigh in?
I will try to keep this brief because I could talk about this for so long, and it's so important. So there's two parts to this. We all know that there's diversity and there's inclusion. So if we think about inclusion, we've always been trying to create an inclusive environment where people from all backgrounds, we say, we just want to make sure you can bring your authentic self, right? And so ERGs, Heidi mentioned that, employee resource groups, our tagline is you don't have to be to belong. And I love that because we also understand, especially with recent events, these affinity groups are so great to find connection and community, but it is just equally as important to have allies. So it's not about being a member of this community, it's about being the ally to them, which makes you a member of the community. But it's so important, I think, and crucial to have these allies to support them. We have over 35,000 ERG members across the country, and I'm really proud of that. But again, it's not about having to find somebody that looks exactly like you. It's just about being inclusive and recognizing that. And then the other thing I was going to say about the diversity piece. So if you know the Henry Ford quote, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And I think if we all agree that we want to see more women and people of color at all levels, but specifically the executive level, I think we would all agree there. I'll just use that as an example. So what we're trying to do, we've been doing it, but we're putting more of a focus on it, is look at those executive introductions or exploratory interviews, whatever you want to call them. So if you think about an executive that has an opening on his or her team, if the opening is already there, they are going to be on a time crunch. They want to make a decision that will most likely lead them with the least amount of disruption to the workforce, which will probably lead them to select somebody that looks like them and comes from a specific background with that specific experience at that specific level, right? And so then we're perpetuating the problem. So if we're able to have these more exploratory interviews when the opening doesn't exist, and we can back up and spend, sometimes, as we all know in the recruiting space, it can take years to develop a relationship with external talent and get to know them and they get to know us. But it's all about the decision makers and making sure that they can look at a diverse background and take the appropriate risk of somebody that might not meet the exact mold or doesn't have the exact experience someone else has. It's about the diverse background. And so I just think we need to be more creative at how we're looking at talent, how these transferable skills can be really applicable, and how it's okay if they don't come with all these boxes checked.
One of the things I recently found in the research I've been combing through, which I thought was super interesting, is that referrals are the #1 problem of companies having more white male workforces. Interestingly, women are more apt to refer men. Men are more apt to refer men. And even our people of color are more likely to refer white men. So even our referral programs actually need another look, because I think, Hilary, your point is exactly on point, right? Like, here is a role and here is a person I know and he looks like me, or he, you know, he fits the mold, and he goes, and we love him and he's great, and everybody continues and we have rave reviews. So that was, for me, one of those moments where you start to realize how deep these challenges run when you look at even our referral programs, which I think most companies would hang their hat on as an excellent source of bringing in great talent and perpetuating a company's excellence. And they're actually part of the problem that we don't even identify easily, right? It's not the first thing we look at when we start looking at our challenges and how we change diversity and inclusion in our business. I don't think that's one of the programs most people are looking at. So for me, that was sort of a moment to really sort of change the way you look at this. The second one I think is really important. I'm not sure who touched on this, is we need to do a better job at bringing people in early and investing in them over the years, right? One of the challenges that we've all really reached is, I would like to hire an SVP who is diverse or female, but there are none. And it's not that there couldn't be one, it's just that I can't find any, and I can't find it because the pool of them is very small, because you go back 10, 15, 20 years and it's been sort of slowly, you know, removing those options from the pool of candidates. And so as businesses, we've got to be better about creating a structure that allows for equal promotion at the very beginning to ensure that we have the people we want at the highest levels. And that is going to take time for us to course correct as a country or even as a world. But the two big ones for me were the referrals, and that we are actually not investing enough in the early years of people's careers to get them to the point where we can put them in positions that we want to put them in.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I do want to talk a little bit about that. But I also, as a person of words, language is, you know, top of my mind at all times. And we need to be so careful with language, as I was saying, you know, particularly when you're starting with a job description that could be exclusive. But I did want to bring up a point that was also brought up by one of our audience members, is that we need to be very mindful about the words we're using when we are talking about candidates. And it's better to use the words underrepresented groups or people of color rather than minorities. So just kind of keep that in the back of your mind as we go forward. I think it's really important to be mindful of that. The other thing, to Leah's point, is, and this will be the last question from me before we turn it over to the audience Q&A. I'm just curious if you could tell us all briefly about initiatives within your organizations that have that development aspect, that leadership development aspect. You know, what are you doing to develop the candidates from the time they walk through the door to get to higher positions in the company? And anyone can take that one.
So again, maybe I can go there first, right? So we do have, you know, concept of, obviously, in any organization, profitability is an important part. So we have a pyramid where we do bring in people from campuses, and we have people who've been with us for, you know, 12, 13, 14 years with us, and they have gone and grown up to SVP level from grounds up. You know, they joined as graduate trainees and they became this thing. So what we truly believe, again, and the DNA is very important for us as an organization, because we believe we have, again, a secret sauce to how we do things. So we want to make sure that we rub that on everybody who's there. And that is where, again, while we are doing our bit, obviously, you know, attrition happens and then we lose people. And I just wanted to touch, this is the biggest challenge that we are facing at this point, is that how will we ensure this DNA kind of, you know, again, you know, getting the DNA into the new people when we are not able to onboard them into offices, and maybe even down the road, they may have less time and opportunity to be able to come and work as a team where they've got to know. So while we are obviously using a lot of, you know, platforms and trainings, you know, internal sensitization, some external trainings, some coaching, as we talk about, you know, again, we talk about, it's not rigidity, you know, again, as I say, like oak, but flexibility and resilience, like, you know, a bamboo tree. So we do all those concepts. Obviously, we're starting from top. I know Leah mentioned that we've got to have a journey from bottom up, but at the same time, again, we all know the direction that a company gives is from the top. So we are trying to do it from that end as well, that we change their way of thinking, they get coached and trained differently. So we just, again, including myself, I'll be participating in a coaching session come next week, where we are going to be told and taught all these things from some of the top in the industry. And that is how we think, because we'll be able to spread that thought process and mechanism of how we want to conduct business in the future.
Just brief pause because we are at the top of the hour again. So Nick, station identification, please.
Sure. Thanks so much to everyone for joining, and thanks for participating in Talent Outlook 2020. Thanks again to our sponsors, who are Appcast, Eightfold, and Monster. At this time, we're going to turn things over to questions from the audience. Lydia will pose them to our panel. So thanks again, Lydia.
Thank you. We have so many questions that we aren't going to be able to get to all of them. So I'm going to cherry pick a few that will drive this conversation forward. And one of the ones that came in early, which I think is definitely a good one, is from Bev. How can we reduce the amount of time it takes to bring a new hire on board? Background checks, drug testing, etc., seem to take forever. And I'm guessing that this is especially true of hourly workers. So do you any of you have tips for getting through that process more quickly?
Well, it's interesting you said that. Just this morning, I was hosting a training on specifically candidate experience and how, we looked at the full life cycle of recruiting, right? By the time we post direct, we're sourcing, we're interviewing, we're debriefing, we're offering, et cetera. And I asked the question of, what do you think is what part of the process makes the biggest impact on the candidate experience? And of course, they all chime in and said, it's actually a trick question because the entire thing does. So if we are, for example, posting a rec and then we have to re-level it or we have to change the location, that takes time. If we are not being strategic about who we are asking to be a part of our interviews, if we're so collaborative and we love that we are, but sometimes with positive intent, we want everybody's opinion and everybody to be a part of the interview process, when really we need to be more strategic about diversity of thought and who are our key stakeholders, right? And then how quickly are we making ourselves available? How quickly are we getting feedback? So the entire thing, in my opinion, is impacts the timeline, which impacts the candidate experience. Obviously, there are things, I don't know if you want me to go into much of a detail about like background check and things like that, but in my opinion, it's the entire process and the engagement and the relationship between talent and the hiring managers.
Heidi,
I can add to that.
Go ahead.
So I think I know I've been talking about process workflow. So I guess, anybody who's trying to solve this problem, first of all, has to draw a workflow of how it is moving and where the intervention is required most. So actually, from identifying the partner itself is an important thing. Some people do a great job, some don't. And again, in the whole cycle, some aspects of the process need a little more hand-holding. And background check happens to be one of them. Sometimes it's not participation by the candidate himself or herself. It's also about responsiveness. They're waiting for some information. So I guess we just have to kind of break it down into smaller pieces and then attack, which is becoming the bottleneck in the whole process. It will start working. And again, I'm saying because we have done that and we've seen wherever there is more, maybe hands-on or somebody has to constantly follow up, we will put more bandwidth to get that thing faster moved.
One of the things we've seen done effectively in order to help with this process is a simple thing you can do at the beginning, which is set expectations for the candidates. So if you tell them ahead of time that this is how long it's going to take, and you will have to take a background check and you will have to do a drug test, it's an interesting sort of phenomenon that really gets you more people who actually pass both of those checks because they know it's going to happen. It's not a surprise. And the expectation has been set. And as long as you hold up your end of the bargain, which can be challenging at times, that tends to keep the candidate experience on the more positive side. And it's such a simple thing to do, but something we all sort of miss in the process. And the really good companies I've seen do it right on their career site or their first page of their application process. Like, we're really excited to have you. This process is going to take you 10 minutes, but the whole process is going to take us 3 weeks. Like, and these are the things that are going to happen. And just being quick in identifying that can really change the dynamic with candidates.
No, it's absolutely true. And, you know, it's a simple thing and it's a free thing. And we also,
it's free.
you know, we don't often factor free things into the equation. Here's another question. I want to try to get to as many of these as possible. From CG, for everyone, what factors will influence your plans to renew a focus on non-essential hiring? Who wants to take that one?
I can take it again. Again, basically, as I mentioned, right, you know, we are all hopeful. Again, I think we all have to have good behavior. Unfortunately, we have seen some not so good behavior in the last few weeks as an increased number of cases that come in the market. So unfortunately, the market will decide. And as, you know, people have said in the market, you know, again, coronavirus will decide, you know, how things move forward. Unfortunately, we have to find a medicine or vaccine. But in assuming that, you know, things go flat or positive from here in terms of addressing the problem. So I guess as I mentioned in our industry, especially I talked about that, we should be back to non-essential hiring pretty much in, I would say, a month, 2 months from now. I'm already on that. Again, as I mentioned, you know, we were hiring about, you know, 50% maybe in the month of April. We're already about 60, 70% in June. And I'm almost, you know, getting pressure regarding some regions because I do have a lot of presence in automotive space where I may get some pressure and may not be able to hire as much, but especially wherever I'm focusing on doing, you know, digital transformation for companies, the hiring, actually, I will be hiring more than I was hiring probably in the early part of this year. So I would say, I would give a time frame of 2 months, 3 months, we would be back to 100%, somewhere even more than 100% hiring.
Thank you. Larry, this one is, I think, going to hit your wheelhouse. What are your thoughts about the order to suspend the H-1B visas on tech talent?
Yeah, it's a big deal here in Silicon Valley, obviously. You know, it's a, what's the right word? It's a deterrent to hire, absolutely. It slows down, it shrinks our pipeline and slows down the hiring. And I think overall puts fear into people who are already in the system. So we haven't really discussed what to do about it yet, but we already did some evaluation of who's at risk in our company now, what's it going to do to hiring. So it's a change and a deterrent.
Back to recruiting, Heidi and Hilary, maybe both of you can answer this one. Elaborate on the relationships with higher education recruitment. Are you targeting different schools than you might have targeted previously for your open positions? And are you still offering management training? Heidi, you want to take that one first?
Sure. So to clarify, we don't have a specific management training program in place at Ball. So I'll kind of take that one off the table. In terms of schools that we are targeting, we are still targeting the same schools. I mean, we have a broad reach throughout the US. We had a very local focus in years past on our intern program because the program was on site, but we also targeted nationally as well. And I mean, to kind of put a different lens on that, we are really going to start targeting our historically Black colleges to make sure we're getting that diverse population at an intern level as well. But I would say for us, I mean, our intern program, we were kind of back and forth if it was a go or not this summer. It is a go, and they are going to start virtually, but we are revisiting our whole program. We had a very, very large program in the past, and we found that a lot of the feedback we were getting was the interns didn't feel as if they were doing, like it was more summer work as opposed to really hardy projects. So we've shrunk down that program to increase our intern to hire conversion ratio and given them quite a bit more work. So we're in the midst of a revamp actually on our program. So I'd say for the time being, we haven't done a lot in a retarget reevaluation, but I do see in the future, I mean, that definitely may pick up with a larger lens than it has in the past.
Yeah, so we look at our university relations. We kind of, when we're targeting schools, we kind of have the 4 main buckets. So like local schools. For me in Denver, that would be like CU, DU. We have top tier schools, so Ivy League, things like that. We have the HBCU schools, of course, and then functional specific schools. So out here, like School of Mines, or like, for example, Weber State has a great technical sales degree. It's very specific to telecom. So anyways, we look at that, and then there's a ton of stuff that our university relations program that we work with them and do. I will say our internship program is actually a diversity initiative. So we hire our interns are people of color or women, and they're diverse in any definition. And our goal is conversion rate. So we want to make sure that we're offering them a job, obviously, but it's not necessarily like a volume play, right? So it's a really specific on these roles that we're working with these interns for. We did unfortunately have to put our internship on hold for this summer, but I love that we're trying to figure out how else can we work with these students. And so we actually just kicked off like a mentorship program for these students that had the internship. And so we will be mentoring them throughout the summer. So hopefully they can still get some experience. It is unfortunate that we had to be in that position, but the mentorship program, I'm hoping we'll get a lot out of that. So. Larry, you look like you wanted to jump in there. Okay.
Thank you. So another question about.
I was going to jump in. One of the questions I actually have for the market, because I don't know the answer to this, is with this increased attention on the historically Black colleges, what happens, right? I think that there's more companies interested now in this group of students than ever really has been so focused before. There aren't that many students that will be able to pull out. And so for me, a lot of the question, while I think these schools are wonderful, is really about the fundamentals of the program itself. And I think the real question isn't so much about the historically Black colleges, but really about the Ivy League colleges and the propensity for the Ivy League schools to have, not enough of a diverse population. And so I think the question is really about what are companies doing to balance off that Ivy League focus? Because I do wonder how many interns we can all go get from the historically Black colleges.
We're starting, Leah, maybe you have an answer to this question, but we're starting to look at no college degree. And how do you develop people with no college degree to widen the diversity pool potentially? And then, there's work to be done to bring people in like that. But I mean, any way to open the pipeline, I think, is something we're looking.
Yeah, and I think, especially pre-COVID when we were in the 3.5% unemployment, it started to become a real question for companies around two things. One, does this job require a college degree, or are we requiring a college degree because that's what we've always done? It's kind of a good question. The second one is, are we paying enough to require the skills and college degrees that we're requiring? I'm going to pay you $18 an hour, but I'm going to require an MBA. Like, who thought this was a good idea, right? So either you need an MBA or you can pay $18 an hour. But if you need an MBA, you probably shouldn't be paying them $18 an hour, right? And that was happening in mass over the last couple of years, where companies' requirements were missing that reality check, right? There's almost like no one in recruiting was taking a minute to say, hiring manager, while I love finding flying purple unicorns, no.
It's almost boilerplate, right? It's like it's embedded in every job description. Must have bachelor. So it's
yeah. It's a great question, right? And I think it's a good time for all of us to reevaluate the requirements and the compensation that goes along with it, right? So that we are making reasonable requests. This actually goes to the diversity thing as well. One of the, and I don't have the source that I can find, it's sort of in the back of my head right now, but there's a variety of data that will tell you that when a candidate looks at your requirements, their gender will dictate what percentage of those requirements they feel they need to have in order to apply for your job. Yeah. So honestly, I have no idea how you control bias on the candidate side, but it's real, it exists. And it's not just women, it's also people of color who will require them to have all of the requirements or close to all of the requirements in order to apply for the job. And so we have a huge job ahead of us to fix this. And I don't know how you fix that first piece, but it is a real issue.
I think we list too many requirements. Like, are all those really essential requirements? If you put 20 requirements, they're not going to do all 20 of those things.
Right.
So women will be like, I only do 10 of those, so I'm not going to apply. A man's like, I'll fake it when I get in there, I'll figure it out.
Exactly. Larry, you hit it on the head. If somebody says, I need 5 to 7 years experience and they have 3, the female's not going to apply and the man is. I mean, so you're exactly right. I think it is looking at what we are asking, what we are requiring. We have senior executives that don't have an undergraduate degree. That's not to say that externally they would get hired. Like, let's be honest, as a VP, let's say it's a VP of sales, externally they're not going to get hired, but we take a lot of pride in, we have plenty of executives that started as a customer facing role and they have worked their way up through the organization. So we put a lot of focus on career growth and leadership development. We have over 100 programs to make sure that we are developing people in the right skill sets. So that's great for those folks that have been able to work themselves up internally, but this needs to care for the external candidate pipeline.
I think that that's a good segue into another question here that talks about requirements and box checking, if you will. Kaylin wants to know, for candidates that have been incarcerated in the past and are trying to re-enter the workforce, particularly for hourly work, what advice would you give that population? And I think that's really, less on the candidate, but more on the employer. What do you do if you have this whole sort of gray area? If someone has a felony charge, it might not be something that would preempt them from being able to do the job. So does anyone have any insight on that?
I'm not running up against it, so I don't have a good answer for that. But what about, like, Hilary, you guys, or Heidi, you guys have more hourly workers than I do?
Yeah.
Is that something you run into?
Yeah, I was just taking myself off mute to answer that one. And I think that is the key, that if it does not stop you from doing the job, should it stop you from working at the organization? And the answer is no, right? I mean, there are certain areas where it could stop a person from doing a job, but I mean, there's a whole handful of other ones that are not. So in those cases, when those come back, it goes to our legal department for review, and they make the decision on it. But it's not a hard stop for us. I know that. I know for a fact it is not a hard stop. Every case is reviewed. And population coming back into the workforce, I would say, get your resume together, use the services that are provided to help you get those interviewing skills and get the resume writing skills, get those things in place, and start applying and show up, because it's not doom and gloom. I mean, there are organizations out there that will absolutely hire you.
Yeah, it's not a knockout for us either. We look at every single background check individually. So we'll look at, if there are charges on somebody's background, we're looking at the type of crime that it was, what was the sentence, how much time has passed since then, have there been any other reoccurrences of charges since then? All of those things we take into consideration, and we actually give the candidate a chance to talk with somebody. So there's a dialogue they can explain. I will say one of the biggest things is you have to disclose, but ahead of time. For us, it's all about the integrity. So of course, violent crimes and theft crimes is more about, we are sending some of our employees into someone's home, or we have really sensitive information for our customers. So we do take those things very seriously, but disclosing ahead of time is one of the most important things. So we take that as a lack of integrity if you answered no to the question of, have I been charged XYZ, and then things come back. So that is a really easy way to knock yourself out unnecessarily. So I would just say, be really honest and open, and we will look at every case individually. There are not black and white rules for that, because we understand not everything is black and white when it comes to this kind of stuff. So appreciate that question.
Yeah, I agree completely. Don't try to hide it, disclose it, and get it out there in the open. And the more transparent you are about it, the more it'll be considered. And we just definitely, that is a fantastic point, Hilary.
Another trend that I was just reading about, actually coincidentally this morning, is something that surfaced during the recession, 2008, 2009. As layoffs were happening, more contingent workers were being brought on as a short-term solution because people still needed to get work done. So Annie is asking, as hiring comes back, do you see more full-time hires, or are companies looking at contingent hires? Anybody can take this one.
I can take that. Then, so basically it's going to be a combination of the two, right? One, which did not exist as robustly as back in 2008, the gig economy we talk about, where it's nothing bad. Again, some people are happy to have the flexibility. They can still work 60 hours. They can take 3 different jobs and give 20 hours each. So that is one. Number two, for when we talk about what is going to be different for us when we go into post-COVID, it is going to be, yes, we will be able to look at the workforce which is not able to commit contiguous work of, say, 8 hours a day, or you just can talk about 3 to 4 hours a day because they have other commitments and they can work from home. So those candidates, those potential candidates will become an option for us, and that will change the demography, because one, we will also have the flexibility of not being able to, maybe sometimes we just need an expert for 20 hours a week for our needs, and that person can do this thing. So yes, there will be a combination of the two. We will hire obviously full-time employees, because we do believe when we, as we talk about, when we do take up some engagement, we want to give our DNA to that, because we have the secret sauce in that space. But yes, it will be, I think, a fairly larger percentage will be based on those SMEs who are doing this, or even otherwise, part of the gig economy, as we call it.
Something about, and this is sort of tagging on to one of the questions that we talked about earlier, Leah, when you mentioned about unrealistic requirements in job positions, written positions. We aren't allowed to ask salary history, and that varies from state to state. So I just wanted to point that out. Lisa, who's been very, very active on our chat, has pointed that out. Thank you, Lisa. But we have another question about adjustments happening to compensation packages. So can you talk about any adjustments that you've made to that? Has anybody had to reduce compensation for a period of time?
I can go first. Basically, we did not impact anybody's compensation barring ourselves, right? So we decided consciously that we will contribute to the system. So only the senior management took a salary reduction for a period. So we have not impacted that. The only thing that was going to change in the future is, again, I just want to relate to the, again, what we talk about Wall Street and, the Main Street. In the past, I would say, this is my understanding, that, 7, 8 years or 10 years, there was a lot of focus where the top line was the big issue for companies, and they were looking at that piece for their valuation, and behavior was driving that. Given where we are, and obviously with so much, other things happening, profitability will become a big factor in the next few years. So there will be those things which will come into play. Again, while obviously we will save money in terms of the travel costs, we'll not fly as much, we'll not drive as much. We may even be able to rationalize our office space need, but it is possible that it will impact the compensation as well. Because as we're saying, if we're making it a global workforce where we can go across, geographies and countries. So, and again, just to put in perspective of what you asked Larry earlier with this change in the immigration process, I hope they thought it well, but this can also have an adverse impact the jobs can start getting shifted outside. And that is where this will have some impact, and maybe all of it will not be positive, in my opinion.
Has anyone else had to change compensation during and after? I'm seeing a lot of shaking heads. Okay.
We did see with some companies that were hiring for essential employees in two groups, both in the nurses. We saw ICU nurses and for respiratory therapists, that compensation was changing in some of the cities that were most impacted. On the nurse side, we were actually seeing for respiratory therapists up to a 3x per hour increase, which is a lot, as you can imagine. But I think that was very sort of acute in the needs. We did see some hourly warehouse workers, driver delivery workers, where there were, some bumps in compensation, a few dollars an hour, which I think the headlines on Amazon is a good one, where we all saw the compensation go up and has now come down. But I think a lot of that is temporary. I think one of the biggest questions from a compensation standpoint is that we are going to have, as a country, a whole bunch of recent college grads that are no longer employed, as a lot of those offers were rescinded. And I haven't at least seen those offers start to go back out. So I think there's going to be a gap in our workforce if we don't start seeing these folks employed soon. And that, I think, not quite the compensation question, but it is another sort of layer in this that we are seeing.
I have an adjacent point. So if we really get to a point where you can work from anywhere, like and we saw LinkedIn showed a stat that 43% of job searches added the word remote in 1 month. Increase.
Professional searches did, yeah.
Right. Yeah. So if that's the case, and I'm like, hey, I don't need to live in a big city now, and I'm going to go move to a different city, you're going to get less pay. Right? You have to go into whatever the job market is. I don't think people are ready for that yet, right? I'm doing the same work. Why would I pay less? Because we have those regional standards, right? So I think that's going to be a struggle we're going to have to think about as time goes on.
Yeah, Lydia, I actually I did want to mention, we did increase our pay temporarily for some of our frontline employees, our customer facing. So, they were doing a lot of really great work, again, keeping our customers connected on our network and going into people's homes. So we temporarily raised their pay, as they very well deserved it.
Absolutely. And that, to some other points that were made about remote work, obviously several of you on this call have frontline workers and essential workers, so they've really not experienced that much of a change in where they actually have to go to a place instead of working from home. But the last question, I want to do sort of a lightning round, and it doesn't necessarily have to reflect your organization, but just sort of what you're thinking about, what you're seeing. Is this move to remote, as it gets sort of further and further away from the beginning of when quarantines started, we're becoming used to it. So do you think that if people can work from anywhere, that is going to open up a talent pool? Larry, as you were starting to say.
Hang on. Two ways I'm thinking about it. One is, I'm trying to tell my organization that there is no finish line. There is no, take the pause off. I want you to do the best work of your career from your kitchen. And that's going to go on, right? I don't want to go back to 40 hours a week in an office. Personally, I don't want to. So we're working with the CEO staff to say, get ready. So it's not going back to work because we're allowed to. It's going back to work because people's attitudes and behaviors have changed. And they're going to expect choice. And we have to figure out a way what that choice is. So our talent ecosystem, we call it Thrive. And so what we're calling this is Thriving Anywhere. And then what that does, if 43% of your people, like we said, LinkedIn, are saying, I can rework from anywhere, our talent pool explodes, right? Like, I don't have to just recruit for where my offices are. So that's another recruiting explosion opportunity if we really believe we can work from anywhere.
Lydia, you're mute.
I know. It's a fat finger syndrome. We just have just about 30 seconds left, so I am going to turn it back over to Nick, who is going to take us out.
Hello again. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to all of our wonderful speakers. That was a great conversation. Thanks again to Appcast, Eightfold, Monster, and to you for participating today. If you'd like to join us for more virtual events, you can head to our website, fromday1.co. That's fromdayone.co, and check out more of our upcoming webinars. On Thursday, July 9th, after a week-long break for the July 4th holiday, we'll resume with Pay with a Shared Purpose, providing employees with the financial benefits to help them get ahead, a panel on financial wellness for the team. Tuesday, July 14th, the future of benefits in an evolving workplace. Thursday, July 16th, the future of apprenticeships in a remote learning era. This has been From Day One. Thanks again.